Welcome back to Markets Today. It's Wednesday, we talk about technology here and we try and understand what is the opportunity set for technology for businesses. Today, we are joined in studio by Mr. George Munga, who is the managing partner for AMG Kenya. Welcome to the show, George.
Thank you, Billy.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
I know in terms of technology, you do a lot of work in terms of consulting, a small, micro, as well as large enterprises within the region. And we do know that in 2020, COVID hit and it hit big. What was the element of technology and how did the opportunity set for technology and businesses morph over this period in your experience?
Billy, I would just want to give you a brief background in
yes, please.
How we came into this technology age.
Okay, fantastic.
You look between 17th and 18th century.
Yes.
We had the agrarian revolution.
Okay.
Where for you to make money, you had to own very huge tracts of of land.
Exactly.
And that is what brought in colonization of some of our countries, because the bigger powers were looking for land to do agriculture. And then come the 19th century, we went into industrialization, and that is where the big corporations started coming in, the likes of
so the big industry parks,
the big industries came in, the likes of Ford, steel, yes, oil, and all that.
All right.
And then within that period, most of the people made money through industrialization.
Okay.
And then in the 20th and 21st century, we've gone into the ICT, or information age. And if you look at the top earners across the globe, you see most of them are companies operating on the information technology space.
Yes.
You talk of Amazon, you talk of Alibaba, you talk of Google, all those, you talk of Alphabet, all those are in the ICT space. And then lately, people are going into the space age, and most companies are going towards that. You remember what Jeff Bezos is doing with SpaceX, and all the other space engineers across UK, across US, and even in Russia. So that is where the world is going into. But I think ICT is still a very huge industry that is yet to be exploited, especially in Africa.
Okay.
If you look at our internet coverage between 2000 to date, it has grown by almost 100%, because by 2000, I think we are barely 10%. Currently, the internet coverage is at around 43%.
Okay.
With 2026, almost 27 million users in Kenya, and that should be the highest across Africa.
Continent. All right.
If you look at our contemporaries in Africa, you look at the internet coverage at 13%, 14%, meaning we still have very big opportunity in that space, and that is where Kenya can be a leader and just stamp its authority across this region. You've seen what Rwanda is doing with the drone technology and all the other technologies, and we might be surprised that Rwanda might leapfrog us as leaders in that space. With the advent of COVID, I think you've seen
sorry, George, before we get into COVID, I like that you've taken us back and walked us through the agrarian, and then the industrial, and now the information age. Maybe I can just dwell on that and break it down. ICT, there's information, there is a facilitating communication, and then there is the element of technology. Today, when you look at Africa or even Kenya as a country and a continent respectively, the sense we get is there's more information going out there. How are we doing when you break down ICT, and what is the opportunity set as a continent and in Kenya in total, before we get into the dynamics of C90?
I think let me just say this again. Let me just take you back briefly. During the Great Revolution, or during the industrial age, most of the persons who made money were the merchants, those who can move products from continent A to continent B, from company A to company B, from consumers, from producers in this location to consumers in the other location. That has been revolutionized. And if you look at the way commerce is being transacted currently, most movers move their wares or their merchandise through information, and that is where the world is headed to. So that even if you are a big merchant, you must tap into information technology to be able to push more and more of your product. I'll give you an example of our retail sector in Kenya.
Okay.
You've seen most of our retailers struggling. You've seen Nakumatt going down the other day, and you've seen Tuskys going down. One of the factors that has made this big corporation to go down, probably, in my thinking, is that a bigger percentage of the population are going towards information technology to source their wares. So I can purchase something from China, I can purchase something from the EU, from the US, without necessarily going through any merchant in between.
Okay.
So that is where the world is moving, and anybody who is trading that space must focus their mind towards that. You've seen many corporations coming into play. You've seen what Safaricom has done in our space, and you've seen that they have leapfrogged most of their competitors to become almost a monopoly in that space, because of the innovations that they've done. You see what SportPesa did. Though SportPesa is not a productive industry per se, and that is why you see they have a bit of challenges. But they were able to monetize a sector that had not been monetized before, especially in Kenya. So in summary, I think ICT is the way to go. The only challenge we have in Africa is getting to know how to monetize ICT, so that when I have an invention, how can I get money out of it? That's the challenge that we have as in this region. Once we crack that, then I'm certain that we will make a lot of. I mean, that industry is one of the leading industries in not only in Kenya but in the region.
Okay, fantastic. So it's finding a way to use technology to facilitate either access or first communication between the buyer and the seller, and then facilitate the movement of these goods and services. And more important, I think where we have succeeded and thrived as a continent is in facilitating payments. Payments that has been strong because, as you have mentioned, Safaricom and M-Pesa. Outside of payments, what else are we doing with technology today?
I think I would want to take a more global perspective than a restricted local perspective. You look at what Alibaba has done. That is in trade. There are companies that have done a lot, especially in agriculture. I was talking to you about the Rwandan case, that they have been able to do their extension services through ICT, so that an individual does not necessarily have to walk to a farmer's place to be able to assist him, but they can consult of using ICT or using technology. So ICT applies to all the industries that you can think of. You think of medicine. You think of medical. How do you get your supplies? How can you consult your doctor through ICT? How can you do some of these things? Okay. I can tell you, there's a friend of mine who was not feeling well, and we had to refer him to India for treatment. And how did you get these guys? We got them to the platform, what they do, and all the packages that they have, and we were able to get that appointment, and it's traveling, I think, by around 20 seconds. Wow. So any industry that you think of, ICT is going to play a very big role in how we transact business. You can see even in transport what Uber has done in our market. It came in and disrupted almost everything, and I think we appreciate it because when it comes in, it lowers the cost of operations, or cost of those products in the market. So in a nutshell, any industry that you have to think of, ICT comes in and plays a very big role.
Okay. You know, it's interesting now when you speak about the element in the context of Uber, and when I look at Kenya today, I'm not using it as a proxy for the rest of the continent, but in that example of Uber, we have a company that came up with technology from outside of the continent, outside of the country. Then it came and connected people who had the capital resources and the equipment, which is laborers and the owners of the cars, with the market.
Correct.
So when I'm looking at it in terms of evolving business models, then as a business person, you're asking yourself, how can I organize labor together? how can I organize the right kind of equipment to facilitate a product or a service? Because you might not necessarily have the technology or the wherewithal to be able to build that kind of technological subset, but that's an emerging opportunity. So because of where you sit, George, and you interact with businesses a lot in your day-to-day, how then is the business model evolving as a consequence of COVID-19, if there's any evolution whatsoever?
I think COVID-19 came in as an eye-opener to most businesses. You remember, most businesses initially still believed in the brick and mortar type of model, which, in my opinion, is not going to last for so long. If I give you an example of the banking industry, initially you had to walk into a banking hall to be able to access your services. But with COVID, we have realized that you can transact almost anything with your bank without necessarily going into the banking hall to do your transactions. The other bit is about meetings and teleconferencing. Initially, we believed that you must go to Intercon, you must go to Kempinski to have your conference. But with COVID, I think we've come to realize that we can have a successful meeting from the comfort of our homes or from the comfort of our offices, without necessarily having a face-to-face meeting. So I think COVID-19 came in as an eye-opener on how far we can push technology to be able to serve our needs. The other example I'd want to give you is the education sector, and we've realized that we can actually push classes or push lessons through ICT, not necessarily having teacher-student interacting one-on-one in a classroom. So in a nutshell, I think, in my opinion, COVID probably has the negative sides or the downsides, but the upside is that it has opened our eyes to the possibilities. The things that we can do without necessarily having a physical presence in that kind of setup. Okay. And I think that is where the market is moving into. Maybe probably by 2023, 2024, you'll find that the business models across the world have changed completely because of what has happened this year.
Okay. Now I'll take you back again to looking at the nation of Kenya. At a holistic level, and I will tap into your accounting and your economic background. As we look at the subsets of the gross domestic product and what contributes to that growth, services has been something that has been growing. We've always been dependent on agriculture. And anytime we talk about Kenya, we say that the people are vibrant, they are very energetic, they're well-versed and well-read. And they can be able to perform things at a very good pace. They're efficient and they are effective. Now, when I look at that and I listen to what you're saying in terms of technology, especially in the education sector, one read-through that I get from that, George, is the fact that there is a huge opportunity to bring the labor force into spaces, I wouldn't say associations, but into spaces where you say, if you have this kind of skill set, then go through step 1, 2, 3, then we certify you, and then there's an opportunity for jobs using the online platform. I think I would look at that vis-a-vis how Uber has actually made it work, because you couldn't just walk into Uber.
Correct.
You need to come in and then you go through a couple of processes.
Correct.
So when I look at it in that particular context, and we go back to the national level, and one of the crises that we possibly could face if we're not careful is the element of youth and unemployment. So what policies, what decisions need to be done or are coming across from the private sector to be able to address this gap using technology to move us forward?
I'd want to give you an example. It's not a very good example, but I would want to give it nonetheless.
Okay.
Most young men currently are doing term papers for students in Europe, students in the US,
yes, they are,
students in Asia, and all that. And quite a number of youths are involved in that industry. And if you look at the revenues that they get from this industry, it's handsome revenues. I think I know of 3 or 4 young men who are earning their living just through those writings. So what that tells you is that we can be able to work for a company in the US without necessarily traveling to the US. We can be able to work for a company in the EU without necessarily traveling to the EU, and that is the power of technology.
Okay.
I think what has lacked in most of our economies, especially in Africa, is policy. Are there structured policies to achieve some of these things? Because most of these companies, when they come into a country like Kenya, they would want to look at the structures, the policies that you have. Do they protect their interests, so that as they come in, they know for sure that if you're doing this with country A or country B, our interests are secure. If you look at the US and the US and China relations, they have been having very tight relations. One is because most jobs that are initially being done in the US have been shipped to China. Why? Because the labor force in the US was quite expensive, and therefore most companies decided to go and set up in China, because one of the very strong labor force that they have, and two, because of the technological advancement in that space. That is what I think a country like Kenya should start looking into, because we have a very strong labor force, which is quite learned, and we can be able to do quite a lot with that youthful, educated population. What we need to tap into is how can we leverage on this resource to be able to increase our GDP at a macro level. Yes, and that is something that the government must come up with. The private sector can only do so much, but the government must come up with policies to ensure that this happens. I'll give you the example of the Konza Techno City. It was a brainchild of the Kibaki government. I think maybe it was not picked up with the current dispensation, but it is something that if it was to be actualized, then you'll find so many companies outsourcing their services to Kenya, because they know everything that I want is within this locality. If I want to outsource labor, I want to outsource anything that I want to outsource, I can fly into Kenya, walk into Konza, and I'll find everything that I need within that location. So I think that is where that is where we need to start. That's how we need to start thinking, and that is where we need to move to if we are to maintain our lead in this region.
Okay, fantastic. So I hear you saying that there could be an opportunity set for business process outsourcing, whether it's done at a national level or even at a micro level. Correct. Because of the element of the cost of labor and the effectiveness of the labor force in Kenya alone. Correct. Okay, this is interesting. So we have opportunities in education. We're beginning to see opportunities in business process outsourcing. Now, let's come to the crux of this conversation, and that's talking about COVID-19. How are businesses structured, and have you seen then an opportunity where companies are saying, okay, I need this kind of technology just to move from a physical value chain onto a virtual value chain? Has that been the trend, or what has happened? Are businesses still operating as they were? Are they putting aside budgets for capital expenditure with regards to technology? Are there more questions coming in with regards to, George, I have this kind of business. How do I integrate with technology because I need access to my virtual consumer?
I was with a team of some of my colleagues, and we were asking ourselves questions, especially with this COVID, that is it possible that we can have a teacher in Kenya teaching students in the US?
I like
or
that.
Or a teacher in Kenya teaching students in UK, or even in China.
Do you know what's interesting, George? I actually have a peer, a good friend of mine, and she's a teacher for the lower levels. And at the onset of COVID-19, she started offering services of sort of tutoring slash, it's not babysitting per se, but she will spend time with them. And once she actually did share and say that she was speaking to a family in Australia, they needed to do a hospital run, and they called and said, we know we don't need to tutor you, but do you mind speaking to our daughter for the next 2 hours? And they sang nursery rhymes, and they were trying to remember the things they learned the previous day, and she got paid. And I was like, oh wow, that's fascinating. And she now has a different career that sort of spans from the point of, if I have 5 kids that I'm not babysitting, but we are spending time together virtually, and I am teaching them. So I like what you're actually going at.
Those are the questions that I think should occupy the minds of our policy makers. I was looking at this education space, just as we were picking up from what you were saying, and Kiswahili is becoming an acceptable language across the world. If you look at the trends, they need teachers to teach these subjects. How can we leverage on technology to be able able to get a pool of students who want to learn Swahili and to teach them from the comfort of our homes.
Yes.
You don't necessarily need to travel to UK, and you can have students in EU, you can have students in the US, you can have students in China.
Yes.
All of them together in a chat room, and you're able to earn your revenues. Those are just the examples of opportunities that COVID has opened our eyes to.
Okay.
If you look at our space, especially my space where we play in audit, there's a company that had requested us to do for them an audit in South Sudan and in Sudan. We don't have a presence in Sudan, but we have presence in South Sudan.
All right.
So in Sudan, we have to get somebody who can coordinate for us. And how are we able to do this? It is through technology. I think there's so many things that we can do remotely that initially we had not realized we can do remotely. So COVID has opened our eyes to some of these opportunities, that being a Kenyan entity doesn't limit me from serving a company in Ethiopia, a company in Sudan, a company in Chad, a company in Egypt. We can do this through ICT. And I told you as we were starting that Kenya is quite advanced in ICT. The only thing we have not been able to do is to monetize these opportunities. I think that is where we need to start cracking our minds, so that if I have this innovation, if I have this good product, how do I monetize that product?
Yes.
That should be what occupies our mind as Kenyans.
That's a good point to take a quick break. How do we then begin to monetize the kind of footwork and legwork that we are doing by leveraging on technology? We take a short break. When we come back, Mr. Munga will be telling us exactly how. Would you like to join this conversation? 20146, that is our SMS line. Alternatively, you could reach out to us, that's at Metropole TV on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or at Mbitha Mwema on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. See you after the break.